September 15 is the anniversary of the Sydney Olympic Games opening ceremony. But what can the past tell us about the future, with Australia to host the Olympic and Paralympic Games again in 2032 in Brisbane? Well, Kieren, here we are, 25 years on from Sydney 2000. And, I look back in your story and I think how incredible. You're here at the AIS as the CEO and of the Sports Commission and playing such a role in developing athletes of the future. We'll be hosting another home games in 2032 in Brisbane. And your story goes way back to 92, the first games you competed at. So I just want to do a bit of a journey through that jungle, if you like. And in Barcelona, you smashed your own world record by 5 seconds. 4 years down the track, you're struggling with form, you get to Atlanta. So tell me about the high of 92 and the struggle of 96 before we even get to Sydney 2000.
Look, it is in many ways it's the classic story, right? When you're young and you're hungry and you're trying to do the first, when it's the first medal, the first gold, the first world record, the hunger's there, you're chasing, and so in many ways it's easy, but you also are quite ignorant, I think back to 92 now, and there's so much of that Olympics that I just didn't appreciate or absorb or spend, even a little bit of time contemplating what it meant to be a part of this. I was there to do my job because I wanted to swim that race and the 400 at the beginning of the meet and the relay, and then to get to the 1500 and just do it. And so you're on this kind of trajectory and the old classic hockey stick of life that, happens. And so 92 in many ways was just a blur and almost easy. Peaked in 94 when the last of the firsts happened, because I hadn't at that point won a World Championship or the Commonwealth Games, and so finishing the set in 94, and then spent 18 months thinking about the final in Atlanta and what it would be like to defend, because I always had this really strong sense that winning an Olympic gold medal is incredible, but what it takes to defend your title, that's significant. That's
why?
Huge.
Is that because other people are coming along behind you, with more intel, greater training regimes, better coaching methods, or is it just the mental strain of saying, can I do everything that was required and better for another 4 years or 2 years?
Well, to be honest, it's a bit of everything, right? So I think the next generation coming through, they're chasing you. You're now the hunted, not the hunter, and that little shift, firstly, is part of it, and the training techniques and the way that nutrition and all those things evolve. Every generation gets taller. We're all incrementally moving forward, and so there's that. But then there is also the classic human trait of, well, I've done it before. I know how to do it again. Don't tell me about boats. I know boats, and before you know it, you just lost a little edge. There's just those little things that you wouldn't have, wasted even a millisecond of time not to get right, to focus, to keep pushing for. Whereas you get experienced, you take that stuff for granted. I know how to do that. It's fine. I don't need to have that real hard look at it. And so it's easy to drift away from the level of intensity and focus that you had first time around. And in an Olympic context, it's that extra layer of hard because it's 4 years between drinks. It's not like you've got another Grand Slam in a few months and you can have a crack at it again if you've messed this one up. It's a long time between opportunities, and so I in the lead up to Atlanta, I took things I wasn't quite putting the effort in that I did leading into Barcelona, and by the time I got to the trials, I guess I had my coming to Jesus moment and realised that I wasn't going to do this easy. I wasn't going to just be able to rely on my experience or my background. I needed to do everything right, and that 3 months between the trials and the games gave me that opportunity to get myself in order and get myself set up much better than I might have been if I'd have, just automatically been selected, or even, in the context of how they do it today, 6 weeks between the trials and the games, even less. That wouldn't have been enough to refocus and reset and close the gap as I was able to in Atlanta.
I've asked you about this before because you wouldn't have got to your third Olympics, home Olympics in Sydney, possibly, if things hadn't just kind of flipped a little in Atlanta. And I saw you after you qualified for the final in 8th position. You only just made it. You were going to swim in lane 8. Who wins a gold medal from lane 8? And as I walked out of the arena, having finished my work for the ABC, I looked through the glass and there was the cool-down pool, and there you were sitting on a bench with Greg Norman, former world number 1, and he gave you a bit of a pep talk. You've never told me what he said. Do you want to tell me today?
Look, yeah, I mean, I have talked about it over the years, but it's funny how you kind of, you also step over stories, and I probably haven't talked about it for a long time, but, it was one of those really weird moments because I'd never met him before. And so you have this guy that you'd, grown up knowing, being amazed by what he'd achieved and this aura. And there he is standing beside you at the Olympics when you're on the verge of breakdown because everything that you'd trained for is falling apart and you're not quite sure what's going wrong and what you need to do next. And so, we had the initial strangers conversation of, oh, how's the weather? Are you enjoying the games? What are you doing here, sort of thing. And we got to that moment where the pleasantries were done and the small talk was done, and he just said to me, oh, you look like you've had a bit of a rough one this morning, but, you're a great champion. You've done this before. You know what to do. You'll be fine. And it even in that millisecond of that moment, yes, it was a bit calming, but it took me a little while to really actually have that aha moment where I'm like, oh, God, of course he's right. It's not like, I've woken up this morning and decided to do a totally different sport in a totally different environment and try to be the world's best on a whim. I know what I'm doing. I've done this many, many, many times before. It's not my first day at the rodeo. And so that it was a grounding to go back to my process, to go back to what I knew, to think about all of the things that I'd relied on that made me, that made it possible for me to get the best out of myself when it really mattered, which the next day, the next afternoon in the final, it really mattered, and I was there.
Well, I'm glad you didn't tell any porkies there, because I did put a call through to Greg and said, what do you remember of the conversation, Greg? And I just want to play you the first little bit of that, if I can get into my phone. This is always the problem. No, I can't. And if I fail this time round, it's going to lock me out. Here we go. I think we're in. Okay, this is Greg. A couple of nights ago, I dropped my husband at the airport. I get this phone call. I go, that's Greg. I know it is. Pull over, and I recorded it. So here we are.
What I said to him, but from one athlete to another, all I can tell you is we see when an athlete gets bogged down mentally. It's not physically, but most of the time it's mental. And, again, I don't know exactly what I said verbatim, but there's few people that can express certain things to certain people at certain levels to allow them to unlock whatever's going on within them. And I saw it in Kieren, and, it hurt me to see it as an athlete. It's hurt me to see it because, he's capable. I knew he was capable of getting in there, number one, qualifying, number two, winning the gold. That shit doesn't disappear, right? It's there. But you have to be able to dig it out somehow. And maybe a word I said, or maybe the fact that I was the number one player in the world, or was number one player in the world, and he could relate to my words, meant a lot to him. Maybe it was the right key to fit in the lock in his door, whatever he had locked up in his head, and it freed him up. And only he knows what it was. But from my perspective, when I watched him, he was a totally different guy. His body language is different. He's muscular. He's a posture was different. As he got onto the block, he was different. It looked like, there was a veil of heaviness just removed from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about right.
And what I love about that is very few people get to where you got to, Kieren, on a number of occasions. Very few people get to one Olympics, let alone three. And for him to say it's only people at that level that can recognise something in what they're seeing another athlete go through, I thought was pretty phenomenal because, and I guess that's the same for all of your major opponents and competitors, the best of the best. There's this kind of recognition of, we're few and far between, and I know what's happening.
Oh, look, 100%. But, it's not, it's also not unique in the human condition, right? Because I think anyone that, if you have someone that has done what you do or is doing it, there's a much easier connection to sort of see through the genius of their advice, because you strip away all of those that sense of bias or the trust issues that might come up when a stranger or someone that you don't really know well wants to give you advice. That just disappears when you're sort of standing there and you go, well, that's Greg Norman. He had what happened at the Masters happen and came back and remained world number one and won many other championships. And, there's a guy who knows how to fight back from a moment that wasn't quite what he wanted it to be. You can't argue with that, You just absolutely just know that whatever he's got to say is going to be gold.
Yeah. Well, as we say, you defended that gold medal. Then you get to Home Olympics in Sydney 2000. Again, you're 4 years older. You're the old man of the pool, more or less. But a Home Olympics is something completely different again, isn't it? And so I wonder if you can explain that experience a little and pivot forward to 2032 and what young Aussies are going to experience there.
Oh, look, there is absolutely no doubt that a home games is totally different to any other. And
more pressure?
That's an individual thing. I think for some, absolutely, and we saw that in Sydney. There was Australian athletes who did reflect that the pressure was so much more intense. But for others, it's a release of pressure because you're comfortable in your home environment and you're surrounded by your people, and that kind of takes away pressure for some. So it's variable. But I think for me, I could never overstate how grateful I am. I was so lucky that it was my third games. Because I think to how I was in Barcelona, if I'd have been that person in Sydney, it would have been a different experience. And yes, I would have probably still taken away some different things than what I did in Barcelona. But I absolutely would not have appreciated it or understood it really for what it was, or really got the context of what it means that, when you're standing in, for us, that pool, there's, it was 8,500, I think, people there. And, 8,200 of them are Australian. And they want you to succeed. They want to be a part of your story. The energy and the care that comes with that is so different when I think about Barcelona, where however many thousand people were there was, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 Aussies in the crowd. That context, you don't get that anywhere other than a home games. And then there is all of there's a lot of extra stuff that comes with it. There's no doubt that, every volunteer that opens a door, that serves you food, that drives you somewhere, they're sending you their well wishes. They know who you are, and they are engaging with you in a way that is very different when you're away from your home environment and you're anonymous and you're nobody and you're just another member of the group. And that can bring with it some challenge. But, again, my old sage advice to those athletes who are going to be in Brisbane is just know that, the person you're talking to, they may not know exactly the right thing to say, but every single one of them deeply, deeply wants you to succeed and be happy. The intent is nothing but the very, very, very best. And take the intent. Don't necessarily take the actual. Take the intent and run with that, and know that makes you stronger. Because, the whole environment, the whole energy, even the things that sit outside it. Like I remember, being in Barcelona, Atlanta, and being engaged with the environment and being kind of, oh, this is really interesting. That musical act, or that famous person that famous Spanish person who, I don't know who that is, but they're doing their thing. That's cool. But then you're at home, and every famous person, every music act, every artist, every speaker, you know who they are, and they are one with you. They're a part of you, and that connection it deepens it so much further than just the sport side of it. Like it's not just about swimming the race or running your race or being involved in the on the field activity. It's that music that artist plays means something to me. That artwork that's being created in this moment or is on the wall of the room that you're in, like that's me, that's my home, that's my people, and that's beyond anything that you'll ever be fortunate enough to experience. And so it comes with so much more. It's so much more wonderful. And of course, what it then means is that the oldies like me who are now around trying to help our athletes get there and have that moment, it comes with a really deeper sense of burden and requirement, because I also know then what happens on the day after it's all over, and the intensity of that challenge and that transition, and the being able to help all of those athletes, whether they've lived their dreams and it's been everything they could have hoped it could be, or the negative increments of everything that comes beyond the other side of that, which let's be honest, even the athletes who come away with gold medals, if they're a really truly competitive human being, there'll still be stuff they won't be happy about. That's just the nature of the beast. And so, what we have to do is make sure the environment supports them, nurtures them, gives them everything, so that it's not a win at all costs myopia. It's actually a win as the great rounded human being that you are, and know that whatever then comes next, you're going to be able to approach that really, really well.
And remember, as always, you can hear the interviews in full by subscribing to the Sports Ambassador podcast. Just search the Sports Ambassador or Tracy Lee Holmes on Patreon, Spotify or Substack. It's the one place where you'll be able to find constant conversations of significance in sport. Why? Because sport matters.